Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched 13 Reasons Why season 4. Let's talk about it. So you're getting the return of Sassy Jean for this video because I am exhausted. I binge watched this series a few weeks ago in order to prepare for this very video. And I have to tell you, this show, when I watched this show, I'm like, am I crazy? Am I insane? Or does this make absolutely no sense? I didn't realize that I'd gotten up and someone had changed the show to How to Get Away with Murder. When did that happen? When did that? I thought we had finished How to Get Away with Murder. What is going on my screen? That's how I feel when I'm watching 13 Reasons Why, at least the subsequent seasons after season 1, because this show makes no sense. It makes no sense. Just know before we even get into this review that there will be spoilers. First of all, this is a spoiler review of season 4, and there will also be spoilers of the previous seasons of this show throughout. Secondly, I will be doing an overall series review of this show at the end of the video, as it is the final season, so look forward to that. And thirdly, this is going to be a roast. For the most part, this is going to be a roast of this show because I need to express what's going we'll get into it, but before we do, please be sure to subscribe to my channel so you can catch new uploads. And if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a like and comment down below and let me know what your thoughts are on this series. Please, more than ever, I want to hear what you have to say about this show, because genuinely I'm at a loss for words. Actually, I'm not. I've got a whole 3 pages worth of notes. Let's get into it. Let's get right into this. So first things first, obviously I'm going to be diving into the elements of the show that I just simply do not like. I find them to be very frustrating, and a lot of them come under the umbrella of SJWism done wrong. Oh boy, is it done wrong. The social commentary in this show is flawed, to say the least. So we're going to go through all of the different types of social commentary. This is going to be an intellectual analysis. This is really going to try and understand what the show was aiming to do and how it failed, or in some cases succeeded in doing so. So we're really going to dive in deep. This roast isn't just coming out of a place of emotional turmoil. Like, we're using a little bit of this, okay? More so than the writers did, apparently. First things first, let's dive into the pivotal social issue of sexual assault / rape. So even though as the show has gone on and more seasons have passed, we've gotten further and further away from the events of season 1, which led to Hannah and Jessica both being sexually assaulted, we're still seeing the impact of that trauma that Jessica is forced to face, and it sometimes even manifests in the form of the ghost of Bryce. Jessica is still trying to find a way to cope with all of that, and she has decided to direct all of her energy and efforts as school president to reform the culture in the school, the misogynistic, toxic masculinity that exists within especially the male sports teams. And that's all well and good, and I think it was a good idea to have her be the school president and represent this really important issue. The problem is that she actually hasn't done anything. She actually hasn't taken the steps in order to bring about long-term change in the misogynistic and toxic masculinity culture that exists in their school. She's known for her powerful speeches and her stunts, but when it actually comes to coordinating with the faculty and creating policies that could bring about change in their school culture, we haven't really seen a lot of that, especially in this season. And that's actually a running theme throughout this series that I have so many issues with, because they keep throwing all of these social issues on the screen at us, but they don't actually present any viable solutions. They don't actually present any answers to these really important questions, and they pat themselves on the back so much for asking the question in the first place, but that simply isn't enough. For example, in the case of Jessica, if she really wanted to be proactive in creating reform, why doesn't she introduce some adults, some experts who have dedicated their lives to educating younger people or even other adults when it comes to the issue of sexual assault and the culture around toxic masculinity? This show could have taken the opportunity to highlight that there are organizations and individuals who have dedicated their whole lives to creating programs to support victims of sexual assault and rape and educate potential perpetrators. But instead, what we get in this show is the depiction of a principal, a school principal, leaning on a student who he knows has gone through her own trauma as an answer to how to fix the culture, the toxic culture that exists in his school. That is insane. That is insane. inhumanity. How could a self-respecting school principal lean on a child to solve these adult issues? At least coordinate with her, at least engage with her, get her ideas, and then do the work to actually bring this reform forward. Oh my goodness. Useless, absolutely useless. You have that instance where the school, along with the parents' financial support, brings about all of these security measures within the school and within the halls, including these cameras and these officers that are just stationed throughout the school. And that causes a literal uprising, which brings me to my second social justice point, which is the police state. I couldn't believe that this show had the audacity to introduce the idea of a police state because the school has metal detectors at its entrance. Are you joking? There are so many schools with metal detectors. Fine, because it has security cameras. And I really don't understand this point, because Jessica did ask for more security measures at the school. And this actually presented itself as a viable solution to the problem that they were having, because they were having a problem. Fights were breaking out literally every single second of the day in those hallways. If you think back to previous seasons, how many times has someone been slammed into a locker? Please. It was a problem. Not to mention their staff to student ratio seems to be like 1 to 1,000. So they needed some eyes on what the students were up to. So I really don't see the problem with the security cam. Oh my God, are you kidding? After everything that's happened in that school, yes, get some security cameras. Are you joking? Perhaps not in the bathrooms or in the locker rooms, but definitely in the hallways. Like, I had absolutely no problem with that measure. And I'm sorry, but I really can't get over the fact that Arnie had the audacity to call this a police state. Please stop. Please stop it. You even have the dean, who apparently is like ex-military or something, and he lived in Korea. I don't know which one, but he even says himself, like, if you spent a day in my shoes in that country, you would know what a police state is. This is not a police state, Han, and I couldn't agree with her more, especially in 2020. In real life 2020, when we've seen elements of a police state emerging because of COVID and because of these recent protests, no. This show, no. They shouldn't have. They should have just cut that out. It was dumb, stupid. And as a result of how little I could empathize with these characters as they rebelled against these rather reasonable measures in order to improve the security, which the school most definitely needs, I found this whole storyline to be superfluous. It was just more fluff. It was more of a reason to insert, again, another social justice message that was entirely unnecessary and badly executed to make it worse. And it also provided another example of one of the major problems with this series just overall, once again, which is that the students have no idea what they want. They don't actually understand a lot of the issues that they're dealing with, but instead of this show admitting that and saying that they need help in order to support themselves and in order to support each other, they need help from outside, preferably by someone with qualifications and maybe someone with a bit more life experience. Imagine that. Someone with a bit more life experience and qualification. Sounds like a professional adult. Yeah, I think that's what they need. A professional adult to help them instead of relying on each other in this weird little gang that they have connected with someone's suicide. Anyway, whatever. This show refuses to acknowledge how preposterous these students act, and it continues to insist that these teenagers, these children, have the knowledge and wisdom and life experience to be able to answer some of life's most difficult questions. Fine. Silly, it's dumb. And speaking of the security measures that they introduced into the school, one theme that was very close to the idea of a police state that they introduced in this season was that of police brutality. Words cannot describe how much I cringed at this show's attempt at exploring police brutality. Right now, oh, I couldn't believe my eyes. I was surprised that there was no disclaimer in front of that episode, because that episode was triggering. That whole episode, the way that it was so badly handled, it was triggering. It was insane. Let's talk about the events that lead up to it before I roast this particular section. Okay, so basically what happens is Diego and Justin get into a fight over Jessica because Diego suspects that Justin killed Bryce in order to get revenge for her. But of course, because of these new security measures in the school, there is a security security officer or police officer that stops them. He separates them and breaks apart the fight. And of course, he uses way more excessive force against Diego, the brown skinned guy, and he calls him a Mexican, and he perpetuates those ugly racist stereotypes of Mexicans always getting into, you know, violence and crime and everything. The kind of stereotype that this series has low-key perpetuated through the character of Tony. But anyways, I digress. We see the Dominican Diego being taken down and arrested by the police officer. And this is so badly done because promptly afterwards a whole riot erupts and the whole school walks out and starts fighting with the police. And this is supposed to be a commentary on police brutality in protesting. I hope not. I hope not. And it's made worse by two things. First of all, the fact that Diego himself doesn't get the time of day. In this show, we don't actually get to explore the effects, the after effects of that trauma that he just experienced of being aggressed by a police officer because of the color of his skin. Because let's face it, Justin didn't get any consequences because of course he's a white boy. So he didn't get any consequences for instigating the fight, but Diego bore the brunt of the punishment for that. But the show doesn't actually care about exploring the consequences of what happened to him because it's too busy wrapping him up in this dumb Bryce murder mystery storyline. And secondly, you have the fact that this show should have never touched this issue with a 10-foot pole to begin with, because generally speaking, it's very pro-police. You have, of course, Alex's dad, who is a deputy, and he has a good relationship with his son and a good relationship with their department, so much so that he even hides a murder on behalf of his son. And you also have this new officer who is basically adopted Tony and he's now his boxing coach and he's presenting him with these new opportunities for his life. And finally, you have the sheriff of the department who Clay is initially incredibly suspicious and paranoid over, but he turns out to just be looking out for Clay, like he wants the best for him. So all in all of the police in this show are the good guys. So what were they trying to do in communicating this message of police brutality? We didn't even see the officer face any consequences for what he did. What was the point of this? They shouldn't have. They shouldn't have done it. They shouldn't have touched this with a 10-foot pole. What a mistake. Oh my God, I almost forgot. There's also several instances where Clay literally assaults or threatens police officers and gets away with it entirely. You have that occasion at the school after the drill where he has a mental breakdown and starts waving around a gun in front of the police. He steals a gun from one of the police officers and waves it around, threatening to kill everyone. And he manages to leave that whole scenario in a stretcher on his way to a mental hospital and not in a body bag on his way to the morgue, which is what would have happened if he was of a certain complexion, right? This is why I'm saying they really shouldn't have even bothered. There's also that occasion where he sets fire to the principal's car during the riot, and then the other occasion where he literally walks into the police station and says that he has a gun and threatens everyone with it, all for attention, and he faces no consequences. No real consequences for his action. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. And speaking of Clay, the next topic that this show completely butchered was that of mental illness. Now, in the first season, mental illness was dealt with such intricacy and intelligence as it explored the reasons why Hannah decided to take her own life after being in that dark mental space for so long. And that was a compelling and innovative exploration of the mental state of a young teenager who is going through it in high school and experiencing severe depression and anxiety over her experience there. But the exploration of almost none of the other characters of this show's mental state is given the same intricacy and intelligence and, quite frankly, sensitivity as Hannah's was in season 1. First of all, you have the character of Jessica, and actually let's bundle her in with the character of Zach as well, because both of these characters are going through a lot of trauma and we've seen them exhibit alcoholic tendencies throughout these seasons, but nothing has been done about it. Literally nothing. There is no suggestion that they've actually gone to get help. There's no suggestion that they've gone to get sober. There's no suggestion that the school has increased its capacity to support these students. Instead, they're given positions of authority and leadership. And that's not a cure for trauma. Yes, it does redirect their efforts and energy in order to do something positive, but that doesn't mean that everything is just fixed, especially in the case of Jessica. You can see that that's not the case. And then, like I said, you have the character of Clay, and the exploration of his mental health has been a point of discussion since season 1 of the show, I believe. But in this season, his mental illness literally manifests as a horror movie trope. There's even a scene where he's looking into the mirror and his reflection has one of those creepy smiles that reminded me of like that film Truth or Dare from 2018. I couldn't believe it. How could this show so irresponsibly present mental illness in this way? How could it depict mental illness in this way? It's just perpetuating the stigma. Instead of this show trying to do what it claims it's trying to do, which is build a discourse amongst young people around these serious topics, it's hurting more than it's helping. I will say that I was very happy to see that the show finally introduced a responsible, compassionate, competent adult therapist, which Clay started to see in this season. I was happy to finally see some viable solutions and methods of support that young people could take on board if they were going through issues that are presented in this series, although not in the circumstances that they're presented, because this show has gone nuts. It's gone down the route of Riverdale, and that's just so frustrating to me, because again, the whole mission statement of the show is to present these very real issues, these very important issues in a real way that young people can completely relate to, and therefore take on board the messaging of this show as it relates to them. But now we've gone down this whole Riverdale / How to Get Away with Murder route in season 2, and that no longer relates to the mission statement that they started off with. Another hot topic that this show tries and inevitably fails to explore throughout season 4 is that of justice, or more specifically, justice for Monty. This season unfortunately continued the dumb storyline that was started in season 3, inarguably the worst season of this entire show, where the whole question of season 3 was who killed Bryce, and in the end it didn't matter who actually killed Bryce because Monty went down for it, except he wasn't able to because he was already dead, because he'd been killed in prison after it was revealed to his inmates that he had raped Tyler in that horrific, literally the most horrific event of assault that was ever depicted in this show. Now I will say that, like I said before, I only recently watched the whole show for the first time, so I didn't actually see the first take that they had for Hannah's suicide. Apparently it was incredibly graphic, but from what they've left behind throughout these seasons, the assault on Tyler was horrendous. It was gut-wrenching. And the idea that the show would then have the audacity to spend pretty much 2 seasons in trying to redeem a character that is no longer present in the case of season 4 just makes me sick. It makes me ill. I was just as angry when they tried to redeem the character of Bryce in season 3. Give me a break. Give me an actual break. But the fact that they're trying to portray Monty as this incredible character who had some flaws but was still such a good guy. Monty was not a good guy. He was a bad guy. If he wasn't a bad guy, who is? Who is a bad guy if not Monty? He sucked. Throughout the entire show, we never saw him smile genuinely. We never saw him have a good time with his friends. They're trying to depict Diego as his best friend, someone who's mourning the loss of this character. Give me a break. Give me a literal, but it makes no sense. It makes me angry. That's all it makes. It makes me angry. And other than the fact that Monty was literal scum, like I don't care what was going on in his private life, the fact that he was facing external and internal homophobia, okay, and the fact that he was facing abuse from his father, fine, noted. But putting aside the fact that he was scum nonetheless, there was also 2 issues with this whole redemption arc for the character of Monty, who again is no longer present on the show. Firstly, a lot of the characters that the writers are trying to use in order to redeem the character of Monty post his death are new to the show themselves. Like you have his sister, you have Diego, you have Winston, who was present in the previous season. We'll get to Winston in a second, but it makes no sense in order to use these characters to present him as a good person, because we don't know them, 1, and 2, we don't know much about their interactions with Monty. We didn't see a flourishing friendship or an endearing brother-sister relationship in the previous season, so why on earth would we care about his relationships with them now? It makes no sense. And why on earth would we be convinced that they would be hell-bent in getting justice for him now? Make it make sense. And secondly, of course, relates to the case of Winston. This show completely ignores, and this is kind of related to the mental illness point, it completely ignores the fact that Winston was abused by Monty. He was beaten up by Monty in order to disguise the fact that they were together, that they were sleeping together. And yes, like I said, internalized homophobia. But the fact that Winston, after Monty is dead, dedicates his whole life's purpose, he changes from a private school to the mess that is Liberty High. And he decides to dedicate his final year in high school, accepting that he is a straight C student, in order to get justice for Monty. Don't make me laugh. Don't make me laugh. And the fact that this show tried to depict this as being okay and normal, it never reconciles with the abusive nature of Monty and Winston's relationship, is outrageous to me. How can you claim to try and explore mental illness in young people in this show? How can you take that claim seriously when you look at how it's treated the character of Winston? And finally, when it comes to the discourse surrounding social justice issues in this show, there is a lot of inconsistency in the terms of the way that the characters refer to these things. So for example, you have the case of Justin, who casually calls Clay gay for attending the prom with Alex and Charlie on their date. And you also have the instance where during the prom itself, Jessica refers to the sex worker that Zach brought with him to prom as a hoe. And she also refers to her as a junkie, which, considering the fact that Justin walks in mere minutes later, that's just baffling to me. If I was trying to give the show the benefit of the doubt, I would perhaps say that maybe they're trying to present the idea that the characters aren't perfect, that they're not always PC, they don't always know how to say things in the perfect way. For example, Jessica, who is the staunch believer in feminism and down with the patriarchy, but all of a sudden shames a sex worker. That's a little bit of inconsistency, but I guess it's supposed to present some nuances in the character. I don't know, this is me being generous. And my final criticism would be as a general point in terms of the structure of the series itself. There are a lot of time jumps throughout where something huge will happen and there'll be a build up to this crescendo, and then all of a sudden it skips like 2 weeks ahead or 3 weeks ahead, or honestly the timeline of the show is just completely off, so I have no idea how far ahead it skips, but all of a sudden we're in a completely different time and what happened way back, and it no longer has the impact that it had when it first happened. A prime example of this is of course during prom when Justin, we'll get to him in a second. When Justin collapses and we skip forward a few weeks to find him in hospital and he is dying of HIV, which I think was such a problematic twist. Such a problematic twist. I did not approve of that twist, nor did I approve of Justin's death in general for this series. But honestly, it was the least of my concerns after all of that. So that's why I'm leaving it till last. But just in terms of the way that it was structured, the show lost a lot of the impact of that by skipping forward to seeing him in the hospital. Although I will say, when he did get into that hospital, it was heartbreaking. It was gut-wrenching. This is the sort of thing that it really just shakes you to your core. The whole character of Justin. And in fact, let's get into some of the things that I do enjoy about this series, because there are a few things that kept me watching throughout these seasons. Number one, the character of Justin. Absolutely 100%, and his ending broke my heart. I'm still heartbroken. That's probably why I'm so annoyed in this video. I'm still heartbroken. It absolutely broke my heart to see, and the way that he went as well. Like, what an incredible character who seemed like he was going through this incredible arc of, yes, finding himself at rock bottom, but then slowly but surely picking himself up, finding a brother in Clay, someone who actually wanted to help mold him, no pun intended, into a better person and help him with his future, help him see a future for himself. It was such a beautiful brotherhood that they had between each other, in comparison especially to the one that he had with Bryce, which was toxic and damaging to him. But then unfortunately we get this horrible twist where we flipped and reversed the situation, and all of the progress that he was making was just dashed, and all of a sudden he's dying of HIV AIDS. Are you joking? What is going on? What is going on? And if the show actually did it properly, it would feel justified. It would feel like, you know what, this is a tragic ending, but it came from somewhere. And actually, they kind of hinted at it throughout the season, where you see Justin, you know, gets into all of these fights and he gets hurt, and a lot of his wounds don't heal very quickly. Throughout the series, when they're skipping through time haphazardly, you see that some of his wounds haven't healed, which is something that I happened to notice as I was casually and not creepily staring at the character. Honestly, I don't want to talk about it. Let's move on. But other than the subtle hints that they wove in regards to his health and the fact that he was on the streets a few seasons ago, we didn't really get an inkling that this would be something that they would tackle, that this would be something that they would broach. But I should have known better. Of course, this series is hell-bent on ticking every single box in the SJW to-do list, so of course it would broach the topic of HIV/AIDS. That's pretty much the only thing that was left. Oh, it's so frustrating. It's it's so frustrating because it wasn't actually done justice. It was just there to tick a box and you could feel it. But overall, like I said, when it comes to the positives of this show, the character of Justin, 100%, he was a great character. I also enjoy the character of Clay, although I do have a few issues with him, especially in regards to his fixation and obsession with Hannah, but that was in previous seasons. In this season, we mostly dealt with his mental illness, and I think they did a good job of portraying the mental illness and portraying the state of mind that this character was in the final year of high school. And I especially enjoyed the actor's performance when he was given the graduation speech. I thought it was very touching and profound. Which brings me to the final positive when it comes to this series, the actors. The actors are what make it. Without them, it would be insane. It would be literal insanity without them. They help ground the characters somewhat, as much as they possibly can, and they help make them feel relatable, even when they're going through the craziest CW-like storylines. So overall, as you could probably tell, I wasn't the biggest fan of season 4 of this series, although I will say that the ending that they gave most of these characters was pretty satisfying, pretty satisfactory, and I did like the fact that we got an appearance from Hannah, even if it was, I think, reused footage. At least we got to tie in the first season of the show, which this show is entirely unrecognizable since the first season, but whatever. We got a tie-in to what the show was originally about, and that felt like a nice little bow to close the show with. And as a result, I'm going to be giving 13 Reasons Why season 4 a 5.5 out of 10. Now, when I think of the entire series as a whole, definitely, I would say that season 3 is the weakest point. I can't believe they dedicated an entire season to redeeming the character of Bryce. Really? Ugh, mistake. But then you have season 4, which I think was the second worst season. Season 2 was decent to me because it still had a connection to season 1. Season 1, of course, being the best one. It was still related to the case of Hannah and finding answers about why it is all of these things happened, and also revealing some extra details in her life that she didn't reveal in the tapes. So I think it actually carried over pretty well from season 1, although I do still maintain that this show did not need to be more than 1 season long. It really did not. I think after season 1, it completely strayed from its premise and its message and its mission statement, and it just became a CW show, if I ever did see one. Riverdale 2.0 featuring How to Get Away with Murder. That's what this show became, and that was very unfortunate considering what it was set out to do at the beginning. And with all of that said, I'm going to be giving 13 Reasons Why the series overall a 6 out of 10. So that's it from me. Now that I told you guys my long thoughts on 13 Reasons Why season 4 and the show overall, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of the series down in the comments below. And truly, I am so interested to hear your thoughts on this one because I'm losing my voice. I'm so frustrated. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.